Your Excellency, Mr. Csaba Kőrösi, President of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Maher Nasser. I'm the officer in charge of the Department of Global Communications for this week, and my day job is Director of the Outreach Division in the same department. I am very honored to welcome those of you with us here in person and everyone joining us virtually to today's town hall with His Excellency Csaba Kőrösi, President of the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The theme of today's town hall is Solutions for a Sustainable Future Through Enhanced Global Cooperation, and will take the form of a conversation and question and answer with President Kőrösi. Today's event is the third in a series of civil society town halls with President Kőrösi. The first was held in December of 2022 and focused on the President's inspiring vision, emphasizing solidarity, sustainability, science, youth empowerment, and partnerships as the means to address the world's challenges. The second town hall was held in April, highlighted the progress and challenges in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as we all know them, with a look towards the upcoming SDG Summit in September of this year. If you missed either of these town halls, I highly recommend watching the recorded sessions on UN Web TV or on YouTube, where you will find valuable insights. And if you have a difficulty finding those, reach out to my colleagues in the civil society unit and they will definitely send you the link. On behalf of my colleagues in DGC, we extend our sincere gratitude to His Excellency Kőrösi for convening today's event with you, representatives of civil society, and for once again placing your voices front and center. Your commitment and active involvement helps create an inclusive, equitable, prosperous, and a peaceful world. As per the report of the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, plans are underway for the SDG Summit in September 2023 and the Summit of the Future in September 2024. Your questions and ideas hold immense importance in shaping those discussions, and we want to hear from you. From addressing global shocks to tackling the challenges of rapid technological change, re-evaluating progress beyond GDP measurements, your questions and insights are invaluable. In addition to today's town hall with the President of the General Assembly and future ones, we have started consultations about a civil society conference in May of next year, that we hope can also serve as an opportunity to feed into preparations for the Summit of the Future. We're also looking at holding it at the United Nations office in Nairobi. And I'm pleased to say that joining us here today is one of the co-facilitators of the 2024 Summit of the Future, His Excellency Mr. Neville Gertzi. He will be joining us during the event, the permanent representative of the Republic of Namibia to the United Nations. The other co-facilitator, Her Excellency Antje Lindertst, the permanent representative of the Federal Republic of Germany, sends her regrets as she is unable to join us today. We are glad to have you here, and we look forward to hearing your reflections at the end of the program. While this town hall is not part of the formal preparatory process for the summits, and as such, no official outcome is expected following this event, it is an opportunity for civil society organizations, youth representatives, and academia like you to be key decision shapers on the road towards implementing the SDGs. Before we begin, I'd like to note that today's event is available in the 6 official languages of the United Nations, so please tune in to the language of your choice. If you're in the room, you can listen with the earpiece located at your seats, and you will find the choice language on the desk itself. For those of you watching online, you can select the language you want to hear at the drop-down menu on your screen, accessible by clicking the globe at the bottom. And for those of you posting on social media, we encourage you to use the following hashtag and handles. On Twitter, @UNDGC_CSO, and at UN_PGA, and to please use the hashtag UN with civil society in your posts. And now it is my honor to introduce His Excellency Mr. Csaba Kőrösi, the President of the 77th session of the General Assembly. President Kőrösi has held various service posts in his home country of Hungary and has dedicated his professional life to public service, serving as head of mission to Greece and the United Arab Emirates, as well as serving as ambassador and permanent representative of Hungary to the United Nations and as vice president of the 66th session of the UN General Assembly. His Excellency has a history of engaging with civil society, and his efforts have been critical in ensuring that the SDGs remain at the top of the global agenda. His respect for civil society is evident in his current presidency, as time and again he highlights the importance of including civil society perspectives in discussions. Once again, we're delighted to have you with us today, and we know many in our audience have questions for you and are eager to get to those. But first, as this is a dialogue first and then we'll take your questions, I would like to begin with a very brief conversation and some questions from us that we took from also some of the feedback that we have received virtually. President Kőrösi, the world today is facing many interlocking crises. Some stem from geopolitical divides, while others are the consequences of our own unsustainable way of living. How do you see the future of multilateralism and the United Nations specifically?
Thank you much, Maher, and very good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure to meet you again. Good morning to all of you in New York. Good afternoon in Europe and Africa. Good evening in Asia, and maybe good morning in Australia. It's so good to be together with you again. Maher, on your question, which is basically referring to some of the comments and questions sent by you in advance, we are in a watershed moment. And it's not a big word. It's a turning point of history. When we go through this turning point, when we are opening the new chapter of history, we still don't realize how significant the new features of this page are, but it is a part of reality, and it applies to the United Nations as well as our whole life in the world. You mentioned the two roots of the crises we are facing in the world. One is a more traditional geopolitical type of conflicts and contradictions. The other one is coming like a tsunami from various corners of our non-sustainable way of operations. But the real novelty of this is not only the complexity of the situation and simultaneous challenges we are facing, but the reality that these two very different types of crises started interacting. And we have the mixture which has never happened to us as humanity in the past to this extent, certainly not in the last 70 years. Where we are, friends, we inherited a package of accumulated risk factors with accelerating tendencies in it. We inherited and partly created together with you transformative goals. We still have mostly old-fashioned policies to address the new risk factors. We still have mostly old-fashioned regulations, be it market or social regulations. We still have mostly old-fashioned institutions, be them national or international institutions. And we have a very rapidly changing set of technologies and science. So from this mixture, we expect transformation. And we are surprised that transformation does not happen to the speed we wanted. There's a good moment to reflect why, how, and what should be changed. As we see now, this transformation is going much slower than what we wanted and what we envisaged, including the SDGs and some other transformative agreements. And I hope we are not going to wait until some influx points, some major eruptions, where the absolutely new situations will force themselves upon us to think differently. Concerning the UN, UN is part of the story. UN is part of us. UN is reflecting the realities out there in the world, and at the same time, UN is the platform where member states, other actors, including yourself, scientists, and all stakeholders, try to iron out some kind of shared understanding of the situation and shared understanding of what we can do. In the UN, we also are facing with traditional confrontations, geopolitical crises, and we are also facing the same non-traditional, non-sustainable way-based challenges, and we see the trajectory change. And that trajectory change is not encouraging for the time being. But not all is gloom and doom, because just recently, let me recall, very recently, we adopted a BBNJ agreement. Sorry for the UN speak. It is an agreement among all member states of regulating biodiversity on the high seas beyond national jurisdiction. It has never been regulated in this way. It's a very good sign. We also adopted a resolution a year ago that we all have the right to healthy, sustainable, and good environment. I was very, very happy to see that. What remains to be seen that we have a good understanding what we should do to pursue that right, because that right now exists. But it's still not clear whose responsibility will be that to ensure. And just to give a final reflection on this basic question, I think we are going to witness a geopolitical divide to stay with us, sometimes may become even deeper. But we may need to think harder how we can adjust the control mechanisms of our security-related cooperations, maybe updating the rules of the geopolitical competition. On the other hand, we need to think very hard how to update the governance of global common goods. It should be partly improved, partly created. The latter now seems to me a more promising direction, promising results on a very short run. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And I think several of the references that you made, I'm sure, will generate some other questions as we move to the taking questions from the audience. My second question, also taken from what we have heard, almost 2 years ago, we marked the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, member states pledged to strengthen global governance for present and future generations. The Secretary General responded with his report, Our Common Agenda, a vision for the future of global cooperation. And you were the former co-chair of the Open Working Group on sustainable development goals, and you're an expert in the SDGs, and I remember working together very closely in 2014 and 2015. If you can tell us maybe how you see the link and connections between the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals and our common agenda, the report from the Secretary General.
Thank you, Maher. Together with you and all those among the audience who were there, we understood at that time when we crafted the SDGs that we ironed out a compromise between what was scientifically necessary and politically possible at that time. Both are changing. We know much more about some trends in the world, particularly in terms of global common goods, and we have new political realities today. So by itself, it would be already a good reason to think about how to move forward. Not in order to forget what has been agreed upon on the SDGs, but how to better implement them. And you may be aware that there is a debate, there was and there is still a debate among member states, what the OCA is about. Is it some kind of smoke screen to go away from the implementation of the SDGs and introduce something that is rather complicated, rather complex, or it is very closely linked to the SDGs? And I hope we all who are participating in this debate, we have read what is in the SDGs and what is in the OCA, and I can tell you I have never written the OCA. It's not my piece, so I'm not the one to sell it to you. But when I made the comparative analysis of the two, to me, the OCA was about 80% on the implementation of the SDGs. During the SDGs, as I mentioned, because it was a compromise, political compromise at that time, and because it was 7 years ago, and 7 years means a whole chapter of history nowadays, the OCA is indicating some of the missing links in the SDGs, or exploring some of the points that are there in the SDGs but were not unfolded at that time yet. Let me give you some examples. We just touched upon, really touched upon during the SDG negotiations of the upcoming technologies, particularly the digital technologies. The digital technologies traditionally kept advancing with a very high exponential speed. We used to call it according to the law of Moore. It means that in every second year, the abilities of our gadgets are doubled. It was true until the artificial intelligence appeared. So from now on, our gadgets' capabilities are improving not twofold every second year, but if the artificial intelligence revolution unfolds, it will be 100 to 1,000 times more powerful within 2 years or 3 years. So, dear friends, the time of 2030, that is the final delivery time of the SDGs, cannot be compared to the days of today, and cannot absolutely be compared to the days of 2015 when we adopted the final document on the Agenda 2030. We also had a discussion together with you during the SDG negotiations on the SDG 17, which was a kind of toolbox how to implement the previous 16. And you may remember there is a very, very modest, small target, what we called at that time going beyond GDP. Very few questioned at that time what this mean. Why is it? What's the problem with the GDP? Why do we go beyond GDP? And today, we see that it should have been done much earlier. Why? When we develop, we make our efforts, we try to focus all our resources, intellectual, financial, technological, scientific resources on our development. What your governments take as a point of reference, first and foremost, to measure the development, the progress. In all your budgets, that's GDP or GDP per capita. In some cases, it is Human Development Index or some other index, but the most overarching index and measurement is the GDP. Let me be a little bit overemphasizing something just for the easier understanding. The GDP has been created not to measure development, but we are using it for measuring development. The GDP has been created to measure financial flows and material flows and flows of services. Originally, it was a military concept, developed for estimating the potential enemy's capability of how much raw materials can be extracted, processed, turned into military hardware, and sent to the front line in a certain period of time. That is in the basis of the GDP. But now, when we measure the GDP, what are we missing? Almost everything that is important from human point of view. We don't measure, for example, the growth or decrease of inequalities within societies. We don't measure how much values that our societies control and have in terms of human capital, in terms of social capital, in terms of natural capital. We don't measure it. We measure what has been sold. So if we convert the human capital or social capital, and if we convert the natural capital into merchandise, that will be measured. The third, it is absolutely irrelevant to some of those processes which actually not increases but decreases the total value of the societies. If you, God forbid, crash your car to the wall, what do you think it means in terms of the GDP? It's good news. It's very good. Because then you will go to the workshop, you will create jobs, you will create imported materials, you will create market demand for new cars. But if you, sorry, once again, apologies, if you marry your cleaning lady or cleaning boy, it is bad for the GDP. So we need to learn how to measure development. What we don't do now. We need to create the system. We are about to develop the system that can, at the same time, measure human capital, social capital, natural capital, built capital, infrastructure, if you wish, and financial capital, to say whether or not we are really creating values it means we are developing or we are eating up values. It means we are regressing because the GDP will not tell us. So that was embedded in the SDGs, but we never unfolded. What we need now, because you know that the progress on the development, on the implementation of the SDGs is much slower and much vaguer than what we wanted to see. Altogether, we are at a level of about 19% of the total implementation of the SDGs, while half of the time is up already. So what we really need to ask ourselves, how can we change the trajectory? How can we change the game itself? And therefore, during the SDG Summit next September, the big question in front of all of us, including your leaders who will come here and recommit themselves to the implementation of the SDGs, the biggest question will be credibility. Why should I believe that we missed mostly the first 7 years with very, very limited results? Why should I believe that as of 23rd of September 2023, the history will change? That it will be a very, very different way of approach, way of implementation. So we have to ask ourselves very honest questions and very difficult questions sometimes. What are the reasons for the slow progress? What is missing from our approach, our implementation, our cooperation in terms of policies, tools? What should change? What should be changed? And do we have the science-based validation mechanism of the implementation? I'm afraid it is not there yet. I'm afraid whatever we have should be upgraded and strengthened. The striking example for that is that when we do all of your countries, the voluntary national reports during the HLPF, most of the reports are focusing on the issues that are done successfully. So when you read the reports, you may have an impression that we are doing quite well. We are progressing, and one country is fairer than the other. So it's a kind of beauty contest. But when you compare this picture with the global data, what we have, it seems like data coming from two different planets. So we need, in my best understanding, to have a unified science-based validation system of the implementation of the SDGs. And probably, I would also be grateful for your reflections on that. Do we need a roadmap for the further implementation of what we agreed upon? And that roadmap should be translated into national realities, to have a constant check where we are. Do we need real-time data on the implementation? And do you want to see that real-time data on your own countries of the implementation? If we want to be credible in September, I think we have to address these questions, and we have to find the most transformative elements. If you wish, the game changers. You may say that it's very difficult. Yes, it is, but it's doable. Those of you who participated in the World Conference March, 3 months ago, you made the miracle there. You made the breakthrough and transformation. The conference, at the end of the day, with the long preparations, of course, came up with those game changers that gave a credible pledge to the world that, yes, it is doable and we know how to do it. That's where we are today, and that's where I see a very close link between the OCA and the SDG agenda, which should go hand in hand. The OCA agenda is helping very much to implement the SDGs.
Thank you very much. And I know that when we talk about the report of the SDG implementation, it doesn't look optimistic. But when I look around and I see surveys conducted by polling companies, that awareness of the SDGs and interest in sustainability is actually rising, especially among young generations. One particular survey in Japan that was published in May showed that 91% of the people asked recognize the SDGs. 40%, especially young people, can talk about the SDGs, and almost 80% are willing to change the companies and brands that they are buying from if they are not committed to sustainability. So when you look at this evidence, I think the work that we have been doing collectively to promote the SDGs is having an impact, but of course it's not enough. I think we need to change the game, and borrowing a sports metaphor, no game is lost in the first half. Coming to the last question on my side, and then we turn it over to you. Mr. President, there's an overall understanding today that business as usual is not an option. Next year, the United Nations is going to host a milestone event, the Summit of the Future, which, and I quote, has an important role to play in reinvigorating multilateralism, boosting implementation of existing commitments, agreeing on concrete solutions to challenges, and restoring trust among member states. Exactly like you summarized it in the first question, that it complements and supports the SDGs. What role do you see for the Summit of the Future, and what are the key challenges the summit needs to address? And we also would like to hear your thoughts on what may be concrete solutions to help us back on a sustainable path.
Maher, let me start with some of the challenges, what we ourselves created. Therefore, if we acknowledge we created them, it might be easier to address them. We started from an integrated agenda. It was called our common agenda, but the same way the integrated agenda of the SDGs. And what did we do as member states more than a year ago? We started with this integrated agenda, a very interesting exercise. We dismembered it. We created at least 5 or 6 negotiating tracks out of it. Despite the fact that it was a diplomatic action plan for a transformative future. But fine, what is done is done. Member states had a good reason to decide so. Now we have to think very hard how to reassemble the results of the 5, 6 various parallel negotiating tracks to make sure that when we arrive at the Summit of the Future, September 2024, all the components can come together, and we shall not have 150 silos, but one vision. One vision that is applicable to all countries and implementable to all of us. What I hope very much that in the forthcoming 1 year, including the Ministerial Summit of the Future, September, in 2 months' time from now, we will pay attention to the fact that we still need to develop this methodology of measuring or planning sustainability transformation. Because unlike other indicators, other measurements in the past, we would like to measure not only what happened, we would like to have a tool that will help us to design further steps on the sustainability transformation. I hope that we will acknowledge, starting from September and throughout the negotiations the next year, that we need a renewed economic thinking. If we try to run the same economies, the same regulations, the same priorities, economic priorities, what we followed in the last 50 years, why would we think that it will take us to a different result? So we need to think very hard how to change and what to change in our economic thinking when we try to make a balance between the created and spent values. And that includes finances as well. Because for the time being, rightly, we complain a lot that finances are not sufficient to make the transformation. Particularly not sufficient if we envisage transformation as something, a very traditional way of development with some adds-on, extra money, that will make the trick. What we really need to think about very hard is how to change the whole financing, what we are financing today. If we keep still financing those projects that actually took us to climate change, took us to water crisis, took us to depletion of biological diversity, or that took us to increase exponential increase of inequalities in our societies. So if we keep that mentality, why would it be wise to expect different results, different outcomes? The good news that we do have all the basic elements and all the basic researches, all the basic knowledge of the new economics. We just need to pull it together. We do not need even to change our budgets, to change our national economic planning from one year to another. We just try to understand why would it be different if we could be able to further develop this new economics. We also, I think, during this and before this summit meeting, need to think very hard that while we are talking about a rights-based approach, which is correct, and I applaud you and all those who support that, should we bring our responsibilities to the same level as our rights? Because everything what we do has consequences. Everything what you don't do also have consequences. If we want to make sure that transformation happens, we have to take full responsibility of what we are doing or what we are not doing. Let me also express my very strong hope that while agreeing on how to make the further transformation, be it on the SDG Summit, be it on the Summit of the Future, science will advise us in a much, much more efficient manner. We need scientific evidence in our decision shaping to make sure that the result is based on scientific evidence, and the result can be also measured against what we know by our best knowledge. And last but not least, I think we will renew an intergenerational contract. We call it Declaration on the Youth, but basically what we are talking about, a transformation that overarching generations. And that would require a good understanding among generations. This basic notion was already in the SDGs as well. Some countries took it very seriously, some others did not. In order to make sure that the transformation has an impact, what we desire, we have to make an understanding what we do today, what we omit today, what we postpone today, and what will be the consequences for tomorrow. And that should be a shared understanding of all those living today. And really, last but not least, I hope we shall get prepared for a digital revolution that will be a magnitude faster than what we went through in the last 20, 25 years. If that could be packaged and have a good understanding of what we are facing, and we can support it by a new agenda of peace, I think that will be a fantastically successful summit of the future.
Thank you, Excellency, for these amazing insights and reflections. And now I know that you're looking forward to a question and answer session with you. We will take 2 questions at a time, and President Kőrösi will then respond. After I select you, please press the microphone button. It will first appear green. Once it's red, that means that you can speak. And please go ahead, introduce yourself first so that we know who's asking the question. And then we'll, and your CSO, civil society affiliation as well. Avoid statements, please. We want as many people as possible to ask questions. And I will interrupt you if you're launched into a long statement, because we are here to engage with each other and not to create a forum for long statements, please. So we'll start maybe looking at the hands, and then we'll see. We'll try to take from different sides. The young lady here first, and then I'll choose the second one. The young man there. These are the first 2. You first. Can you turn off the microphone? No, turn off your microphone. Turn it off first. Yes, please. You can. This lady here. Please.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction and all of the great work that's been happening at the United Nations. My name is Alan Krita Dayal. I am the North America Focal Point Lead for the UN Major Group for Children and Youth. And today I wanted to highlight a few of the pressing issues faced by youth today, including the climate crisis, the water crisis, as well as a lot of educational needs around the globe in terms of accessibility and inclusion. So there was a comment made earlier in terms of how can we create smarter cities and digital governance in terms of leveraging artificial intelligence and data analytics. So I was curious to know what recommendations would you have for various countries around the globe in terms of how can we leverage data, key insights, how can we involve youth in key decision-making processes so that as a community, we're best including all voices when it comes to creating solutions, and that we're also best optimizing our resources when it comes to, automating different processes, collecting data effectively, and coming out with a solution that will best address the needs of the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am John Anari from West Papua indigenous people. I came from West Papua or New Guinea Island, but my island is still occupied and colonized by Indonesia. So I'm coming here to asking the president, because the agenda sustainable development, I think will not running for my peoples. Because before, when the Dutch leave our people in 1962, our people is 1 million. But when Indonesia occupied in 1962 with the United Nations Temporary Executive Authority, and then after that transferred to Indonesia in 1963, And then Indonesia control from 1960 through 1969, they give us the referendum, and that's the fake referendum fought by 625 Indonesian people, and then the settler, the indigenous people only 400. And then
Question, please.
and then my question is, can you give our indigenous people the right of self-determination? Because the war is still going on in Papua, in West Papua Island today, and our indigenous resident, we call West Papua National Liberation Army, still fighting on the war, and then Indonesians send so many thousand, and then 63,000 my people, indigenous people in refugees running to the jungle forest of New Guinea, and then they get malaria, sick, and everything, and then Indonesian settler came, occupied our territory, they control our government, they control the mining, oil, and everything for them and my people. Until today, in 1963, until today, our people today decreased from 1 million, and today my people only 600,000 people.
Thank you.
I think for 2023 agenda, maybe my people empty like Indian people in the United States and the Aboriginal people in Australia. So my question, can you facilitate us to dialogue with Indonesian, because the war is still going on, and then can you give us our right to self-determination? Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll take a third question. I think it's easier to take 3 at a time. The young lady there.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Florence Puya, 17 years old from Afghanistan, and I'm captain of Afghanistan National Robotics Team and human rights activist. So today, half of my countrymen are deprived from their very basic rights, and women in my country are not allowed to work. They are not allowed to go to gyms, beauty salons, swimming pool, or more importantly, they are deprived from going to schools, which is very normal for other girls in any countries to do this. Now my question is, what UN has done for helping Afghan girls so far? And what can we do as a young generation for making a better future for our peers in Afghanistan? Thank you so much.
Thank you. President.
Thank you very much indeed. 3 very, very different type of interest and questions. Let me start with that of Ellen, if I understood your name correctly, from the Children and Youth. Data. Data's role in decision-making, data's role in impact, data's role in resource optimizing, and data's roles in how we organize collection of data itself. If we envisage the development ahead of us as a transformative process, and that's what we agreed upon, it is a very, very complex, multifaceted progress, very complex development with many, many components. Therefore, it is absolutely important that when we take a decision where to go, how to go, first and foremost, we have to take the point of departure correctly, where we are. The second, we have to make the best calculations according to our knowledge of what will be the impact and side impacts of our decisions and projects we are implementing. Why do I mention side impacts? Or with some other expressions, we call it externalities. Because if we only focus on what we really want to achieve in a very, very narrow manner and leave everything else outside of attention, with the notion that what we don't look at, what we don't measure, that wouldn't exist, we deceive ourselves. those externalities keep accumulating and having a great impact, much greater than what we're supposed to. Some of those externalities you know very well. We call them climate change, we call them water crisis, depletion of biodiversity, depletion of oceans. So it's very important that we have a standardized sampling of data. The second, we need to have a standardized processing of data, and we need a tool that would help us to see what are the total impacts of our decisions in terms of data, measurable things. If our development 50 years, 60 years ago was mostly driven by the notion of accumulating wealth, making economies grow, accumulating finances, which were very desirable and understandable goals and ways, we have to acknowledge that now, if we want to make this, the sustainability transformation, it should be a data-based transformation. Verifiable and standardized data-based transformation. Without it, the resource efficiency will not be there, and without it, the balanced approach of development will not be met. So I think for all of us in the United Nations, including yourselves who are working with the United Nations, we need to improve our system of data validation and data processing and data usage. Let me give you a very concrete example. You've also mentioned the climate crisis, the water crisis. We still use them separately, because we always used to speak about climate crisis, water crisis, food crisis, and so on. Though we know that climate crisis and water crisis are for 80% overlapping each other. And for most of you, climate crisis is appearing as a water crisis. But let me be very provocative with my question. Have we ever integrated our climate and water policies? No. With the exception of some countries and some communities. Have we ever integrated our climate and water database? No. We keep them separately. What if we try to do it? What if we create a system that would answer both climate, water, and I would say food and energy? It is more complicated, yes, though we have the capability of sampling and processing this data. That would really serve sustainable development if we do not keep them separately. So many thanks for your approach and your questions. I think you are showing the way ahead. That's where we would like to go. Could I remind you that during the vote conference, one of the game changers we came up with at the very end was to create the global water information system, which was based on the integration of water and climate data, which would serve all member states of the United Nations, smaller and larger communities, even those who may not have all the scientific and institutional capabilities. Today, about 40% of the necessary data can be attained from satellites. We have already the discussions with those countries, some of those countries who have the satellite capabilities of data sampling. And they all said that if the system is put right, they would be offering their satellite-based data for the UN for creating a system that is serving all of us. For the dear colleague from Western Papua, and I remember your question during the previous town hall as well. Sometimes in these discussions, I feel like the fifth husband of Elizabeth Taylor. I roughly know what you are expecting from me, but I'm not sure I can deliver. The issue of national sovereignty is not in my hands. I cannot give national sovereignty to anybody, but the UN has the fourth committee, which is dealing with the issues of former colonies or territories that have not gained their independence. And I'm sure that would be, if the issue is pending, that would be the proper place to discuss it, to bring it there and to discuss it. For my young colleague from Afghanistan, the young lady, I'm very, very much depressed what I saw in the last 1 year in Afghanistan in terms of women's rights and girls' rights. We are talking about 50% of the society. If we think that a society wants to prosper, wants to develop, never mind what is the culture or religious background of our societies, we need the capabilities of the whole society to be employed for the best of the community. The UN is trying to engage with the government, with the current government of Afghanistan. I saw some of the negotiations, some of the meetings read out as well. I'm not too much encouraged so far. You may know that the UN has decided that the UN-employed women will not be discharged from their functions. The UN believes that Afghanistan needs all its citizens' capabilities. And I would like to appeal here to all of you. If we want to make prosperous societies, we need everybody's knowledge. We need everybody's capabilities. And we need our shared capabilities of discussing most of the difficult issues, not referring them to the sphere of taboo. We saw how important role and how useful role for the Afghan societies women could play years back. We know how talented they are. They need to use their talent for the best of Afghanistan.
Thank you, PJ. We'll take 3 more questions, and I see more hands coming up. We'll take one from the back, the gentleman in the middle, then one next to you, yes? Then one here, Lisa, and the first lady on that side. Thanks. We have time. We'll get to you, don't worry. But
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Nasir, and everyone for organizing this extremely crucial conference on civil society. My name is Arif. I'm coming from Sweden, but originally from Afghanistan. As of now that we speak here at the United Nations today, it has been 645 days. I repeat, it has been 645 days where girls where teenage girls and women in Afghanistan, they are banned from attending secondary school and university. Free, fair, and independent civil society is the backbone of democracy, where people have the freedom to exercise their civil and political rights. But since the takeover of the Taliban in Afghanistan, in Afghanistan,
yes.
every civil society defender.
Can you get to a question? Because
Yes,
we want to avoid
Thank you.
statements. I mean, we all recognize the situation in Afghanistan, which was the previous question, but please get to a question so that others have a chance, please.
Thank you. I'm getting to the question. So, people in Afghanistan, they have completely lost their freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and everything. So, and the Taliban, they have declared a war on women, which account for gender persecution and gender apartheid. And these all have been happening under the watch of the UN and the civil society and international community. Today, I'm here to speak not only for you to hear me, thank you for hearing me, but what I want, but what the people in Afghanistan and every teenage girl, they want from us, from this organization, that we should take specific and functional actions. So my question to you is, Mr. President and dear civil society organizations, that what specific actions and functional actions can the UN, international community, and civil society organizations can take in order that the Taliban should not restrict and ban civil society movements in Afghanistan anymore, because much has been happening under the UN watch and international community, but unfortunately there has not been taken any significant action from the international community that the Taliban should not go further and further. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maher, and greetings, Mr. President. My name is Lisa Russell. I'm an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and the founder of Create 2030, and I have brought together a group of professional artists. We have a comedian, a dancer, another comedian, and a filmmaker. And my question to you is, do you have any plans to create any sort of system that would allow artists and creatives to have representation in the programming of the UN? I know I've addressed your office before, because I do believe that when you have appropriate representation, whether you are a young person, an indigenous leader, a woman, then you have more responsible policies and programs. And I feel that we have an untapped source of creativity and power and creative thinking and problem solving that could be beneficial to helping us achieve the SDGs if there was a better mechanism for artists to be engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the floor. My name is Shay Gopal. I'm the permanent representative of the International Organization of Employers, and I'm the co-chair of the major group Business and Industry. I'd like to ask you 3 questions. You talk about the inclusion of youth. We need a lot of people to address AI, technologies, and issues. Why aren't we including more young people, startups, in our discussions on technology and business? Second, SMEs. 70 to 90% of jobs are created in SMEs in many least developed countries. We were at the LDC 5. We addressed the governments and groups. However, why aren't governments doing more to address corruption, governance, legislation which makes it flexible for SMEs to develop jobs, and to address education, skills, and talent? Business needs talent. And they're not receiving this. And we're afraid that the governments are not listening enough to not just large businesses, but small ones in least developed countries. Thank you.
Thank you much. For Arif, I fully understand your position and hear what you're saying. We partly discussed it a couple of minutes ago when we had a kind of conversation with the young lady from Afghanistan. You are asking what specific questions, what specific actions by the UN, the international community, and civil society could be envisaged to improve the situation in Afghanistan, be it for the civil society, young or women. Let me turn it back to you, since you are from Afghanistan, not me. What would be your suggestion? What do you think the best action, whoever is the international community, what the best and rights-based and legally well-balanced action of the United Nations could be envisaged that would help the people of Afghanistan? What would be the best ways of talk to the Taliban leadership in Afghanistan? If you have concrete suggestions, please send us to the OPGA, to the Office of the President of the General Assembly. I promise you that we'll study it very, very carefully. You may know that the UN is present now in Afghanistan and trying to explore all the ways and all the possibilities, be them protection of the young, of the ladies, be them offering jobs even despite grave difficulties, be it addressing the narco production in the country, or be it addressing some economic prosperity of the country. But if you have better suggestions, please don't keep it for yourself. Share it with us, and we'll definitely pay a very good attention for that. Lisa, thank you much for offering the capabilities and readiness of artists. We need it. I acknowledge this is the most boring picture you can have now. Two gray-haired, dark-suited men sitting far away from you behind the high desks. It is something what I really hate. It is not something that could create a common understanding, a better understanding among us. We need a much fresher and much more inspiring approach, particularly to those questions that might be difficult. But the good news is that the big hurdle in front of us, the SDG Summit, and big challenge for us, what I mentioned already an hour ago or so, will be preceded by 2 days. So the SDG Summit will start on Monday and will go to Tuesday. Saturday and Sunday will be stakeholder days. And I'm very much encouraged by those who are working on the artistic design, the communication design, and the age-minded and science-minded design of those 2 days. Together with you, I also believe that we need to improve this organization. We need to expand the attention of this organization, and we need to renew the tools of this organization, including those inspiring elements what you have just mentioned. So let's give it a try in September. If you don't like what is coming out, please come back and say, I know something better. Let's do it. Be it music, through music, be it design, or be it a kind of fresher approach to some of the difficult issues we are trying to address. So don't forget Saturday, Sunday, ahead of the high-level week. From the major groups of industry, I understand that it was not so much a question, it was a statement, and I agree with the statement. I agree that artificial intelligence will change our lives. I agree that there are too little, very, very few people who really understand what artificial intelligence is about, what it is promising to us, what might be the risk factors, and how to use it. We need much more people, and probably you will look for those people not from my generation, but from my daughter's generation. I also agree that if the vast majority of the jobs are created by SMEs, we need their representation much better placed in our conversation. Let us not forget that in 15 years' time from now, about 1/3 of the then GDP would come from companies and from industries that either don't exist today or they are in embryonic form today. More than 1/3 of the jobs in 15 years' time from now don't exist today, or maybe more than 1/3. So I fully agree that dealing with those who probably are the fastest in creating the new types of jobs and new types of knowledge and capabilities must have a better approach to our conversations. I hope very much that the major groups can solve this question, and you will be very much welcome. Whether or not governments are listening to those companies and to those organizations representing those companies, I see a very colorful picture in the world. Some countries do, and when you look at their ratings and rankings in terms of competitiveness, capability of creating new values, those countries are usually doing very well. Those countries where this feedback mechanism doesn't work too well, they usually suffer it in terms of future competitiveness. So I agree, though I'm not in the position to tell governments how they should change their internal mechanism of information changing and information management. But I fully agree with you that if we want to have a kind of contract, social contract in our societies, in my understanding, we need two contracts. One is among the generations, the other one is among stakeholders. If we want those contracts to serve the sustainability transformation, what we all wish to see, then we have to make sure that those who create the new values should be given a place around the table.
Thank you. We'll go for the next round, and I think the lady here on this end, let me see from behind, not always taking from the front row. There, the second lady on the back, white shirt, and the young lady here. Thank you. Start. You can start. Thanks.
Is it on? Okay. I'd like to first and foremost say a huge thank you to you, Mr. President of the General Assembly, for this timely meeting, and also to you, Maha. Shukran Jazeer. Attorney Gorgeous Danma Eze, Secretary of the African Bar Association, and also member of the New York City Bar Association. I'll get straight to the question first before making a general observation. Firstly, how can we ensure that those in developing countries are indeed partakers in the groundbreaking advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, biotechnology, and the internet revolution? And how many of us will ultimately profit from this fourth industrial revolution, or indeed from the green technology? We're all aware we live in a time of tremendous and groundbreaking technological, scientific, and indeed innovative breakthroughs. However, not all of us will benefit from it, as many in developing countries are being left behind as a result of political, social, and indeed economic consequences of emerging inequality. Mr. President, I put the question to you. A huge thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you for your time and expertise this morning. My name is Jillian D'Souza Nazareth. I represent the Red Dot Foundation and also a member of the NGO Committee on Social Development and the Status of Women. My question is simple. We agree that SDG achievement is lagging. Is there work happening that you can share on the introduction and implementation of a binding framework to member states on SDG achievement? Thank you.
Thank you, and I like the brevity of your question.
Good morning. Thank you for your patience in going through all of these questions and offering your expertise. My name's Lavina, and I represent the Boomer M, which stands for Boomer Empowerment, and our goal is to bridge the digital divide. Everybody here talks about AI, data analytics, and how there are breakthroughs happening every minute. We're committed to making this information and knowledge accessible to people of all ages and abilities. My question is how we can come together as a community to expand our vision. As a startup, we're offering all that we can, but we're still limited. How we can make this into a global movement so this becomes accessible to people in different countries and different languages, and they can enjoy technology just as much as we do it.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Let me try to combine the first and third question, that of the colleague from the African Bar Association and Slovenia. And let me first acknowledge that the divide or inequalities within societies and among societies is on the rise now. Despite our goals, despite our commitments, and despite our efforts. And it has many, many reasons why the inequalities are rising. Let me just recall one of them, because we usually don't even measure inequalities. When we talk about your countries, the first data we get is the GDP per capita, maybe Human Development Index, maybe export, import data, sovereign debts, and so on. None of them is indicating anything on the internal breakdown of the well-being of the society. So, first and foremost, and it does not depend on the artificial intelligence or even digital divide, we have to create a thinking that is more attentive to the inequalities within our societies and among our countries as well. The second, the artificial intelligence that is now exponentially growing is roughly in the stage when we discovered that there's a new type of energy that is coming from the matter, from nucleus. And we started exploring it, And we envisaged that it will be a new age. We called them at that time nuclear age, without still much regulations of what are we going to use the nuclear energy for and what we are not going to use nuclear energy for, what will be the rules of the game. But what we can clearly state that those companies, those countries that now have the capability of the technological jump will have a major advancement and major advantage on the markets. So unless we do something more based on solidarity, the today's inequalities within countries and among countries are set to grow. We know that these inequalities cannot grow endlessly without consequences. And we don't want to see those inequalities grow endlessly. Coming directly to your question, which was a kind of digital equality or digital justice, we still are a little bit hesitant. Where is the place to make a deal? It might be that we need to create an organization. But as long as we don't have it, the negotiations about how to address the digital divide and the digital access is here in the General Assembly. And one of the 16 negotiating processes that we are conducting now with member states, among member states, is a so-called digital compact. It is part of the big package that will hopefully come to fruition by September 2024, when we try to address the issues of the access to internet, the fair share of each and everybody to give equal chances, addressing the major challenges, what we see now of the artificial intelligence, and addressing some issues that might be of our help, how to harness the artificial intelligence. So by September 2024, hopefully, we shall have a global compact among 193 countries. So this was a good news. Let me share with you my concern. The digital revolution, particularly the artificial intelligence, is developing much faster than our negotiations. So I'm afraid that if by September 2024 we can iron out a good deal of closing the digital gap, we shall be able to answering the questions that were pertinent 3 years ago. But we might not be including those questions that are going to change our lives profoundly in 12 months' time from now. So my plea to all those in the civil society who can help member states negotiating the digital compact, bring your knowledge. Help member states and their negotiators to integrate the relevant aspects and information concerning the development of the artificial intelligence. Because we all agree that the AI should serve the well-being of the people. If we can make sure that that aspect of the AI is unfolded and any potential risk factors stemming from the AI could be contained, that would be a good job by September 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's look again. The young gentleman here in the middle. Yes, let me choose the other two first. This gentleman here. Lady here.
Thank you very much. My name is Sean Schrader. I'm here on behalf of the Youngo organization. Really appreciate all of your insights today. Civil discourse, I think, is really important across the world, and it's witnessed in different areas how that is becoming more challenging, especially in perceiving and understanding different viewpoints. I was wondering if you had any advice or guidance to give to member states and their governments and leaders for how to create opportunities to promote civil discourse and ensure every perspective is heard, sort of like we've been able to do here today. Thank you very much.
Wait until it turns red.
Hello, my name is JB. I'm from Youth for Privacy. We are a group of young students and professionals who care deeply about privacy in the digital space. And the question I want to ask you is that it seems that based on our experience with the United Nations, there are not only a lot of problems in terms of accessing the space, but also the whole logistical aspects of participating in various United Nations forums and functionalities. And that really hinders abilities for diverse voices, especially from the youth, of participating in these kind of processes, especially when it comes to digital rights, privacy, AI, and climate change, which greatly affects us. So I was wondering, in terms of, as you said, you mentioned earlier, updating the tools of United Nations, what kind of tools do you think could be updated so that more voices, diverse voices, could be in these kind of rooms and these kind of functionalities? Thank you.
Hi there. Can I be heard? Great. I am Angelina Spicer. I'm a stand-up comedian and what I call an accidental activist. I joined this work after having a debilitating occurrence of postpartum depression and anxiety, and it has led me to start a global movement to normalize the conversations around postpartum depression and anxiety using comedy. So through my work and traveling the globe and learning about some of the challenges that women face, not only in the US, but abroad in places like Israel, in Ghana, and soon in Rwanda and Tanzania, I've learned that this is a global issue, that women are suffering in silence, experiencing these debilitating feelings after they have children, and I wonder what the UN is doing to increase investments and research and development specifically focused on women's health issues.
Thank you.
Again, I start feeling like the fifth husband of Elizabeth Taylor, but on Sean's question, if I understand correctly, the question will be about the inclusion of civil society into the negotiating processes and into the deliberations in the United Nations. And let me combine it with the question or notion raised by JB. You may know that there is a constant discussion among member states of the nature or the changing nature of the United Nations. Some member states are very keen on stressing that it is an intergovernmental organization, and therefore those who should be there in the room, should be there around the negotiating table, are the representatives of the governments. Some others, more and more, I would say majority, are stating that we are discussing issues that have a direct impact of those who are not around the table. These member states stating that none of us has the monopoly for wisdom. So when we seek complex solutions, integrated solutions for very, very complicated crisis phenomena, we need to utilize the knowledge of all. Still, it is a constant debate among member states how to do it. Let me offer you a very pragmatic approach. A part of town halls in the past, in the present, and I hope in the future, will be very, very important platforms for discussing as we do it right now. When in this session we started 16 negotiating processes, and I nominated the co-facilitators and co-chairs of the negotiating processes, and one of them is here with us, and I would like to welcome once again the Ambassador of Namibia, who is chairing and co-chairing the negotiating processes, taking us to the Summit of the Future. So when I requested this 16 multiplied by 2 ambassadors, my first request to them was, first, please pay attention of how to create a common knowledge base among all of us, among member states as well, but include all those actors in the stock-taking phase who have something to say, who have expertise, who have knowledge, who have experience, and who are coming from the field what we are trying to regulate and trying to develop. And I'm so grateful to the colleagues, including Ambassador Neville, who followed this line, and while making the stock-taking consultations, they invited civil society, they invited academia, they invited the business community and many others to make sure that we have the most important considerations on the table before member states start actually negotiating the outcome of the processes. I hope I can make a kind of promise to you as well, though I won't be around, but as it was in the past, I hope it will be in the future as well, at least as significantly as it was in the past. The negotiating processes that are leading us to high-level meetings, to big decision-makings, should have a space for including the non-state stakeholders, you. So please don't be shy. Bring your notions, bring your ideas, and make sure that your ideas, your interests, your suggestions are integrated in the big picture. If that is done successfully, then the negotiators and the co-chairs and co-facilitators of the negotiating processes will have an easier task of incorporating your approaches, your notions, and your suggestions. On the mental health issues, particularly it was a mental health for ladies. May I expand a little bit this issue, because it is not only ladies that are facing mental health issues. All of us do. Interestingly, we don't shy away when we say that I have to go to see my dentist. No, it's okay. No, sure. But I have to go to see my psychiatrists. Many would think, there is something crazy No. If we accept that the well-being is a balance of physical and mental well-being, and none of them could be separated from the other, then we might be much better off. We have 3 health-related negotiations going on now in the General Assembly, though we are not the prime producer of the health-related knowledge, as you may know. One of them is the pandemic preparedness, to iron out actions, lessons learned of what we learned from the COVID pandemic. The other one, how shall we get prepared for the next one? The other one is how to fight tuberculosis that is spreading again. And last but not least, on the universal health coverage. All the 3 have an aspect of focusing on the mental health as well. But there's a better news, because we are only laymen here in New York. We are using the knowledge of what you are bringing to us, or what some UN agencies are bringing to us, or what science brings to us, but we ourselves, with the exception of very, very few, are not doctors, not psychiatrists. The WHO, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, has a very, very strong program of focusing on the improved health, mental health of our societies. If in an average society, in a medium income country or in a high income country, more than 1/3 of the population is suffering from some kind of mental depression, disease, disorder, temporary or long-term, it means that it is not something that can be neglected. It is something that our societies naturally react on the crisis we are all in. So we have to address not only the crisis itself, but the way how we treat ourselves as well. So the good news that the WHO is very, very keen on developing further programs on that. But thank you much for bringing it up.
Thank you, President Kőrösi. The last 3 questions. A very young lady here in the front row. Let me see. Second row in the middle. Yes. And let me, from this side. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Janani Shivakumar, and I'm a student at UNC Chapel Hill and the founder of Girls Play Global, a grassroots NGO to use sports to address and enhance the SDGs. So on the topic of advancing human development, improving health and wellness through quality food and food security are 2 important areas of concern. So given that 2023 was declared by the UN as the International Year of Millets, what are the UN's plans or programs to execute this vision as something more than just a declaration, to address both food insecurity and sustainability as they both go hand in hand?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for this great discussion. I am Cynthia Matthew and I belong to India. I am a citizen of India. I'm sure you are aware of the continuing violence that is taking place in the state of Manipur in India. As so many people are being killed, women and children have become homeless, and there's a lot of destruction happening in the state of Manipur. My question is, do you think the international community could put some pressure on my country to end violence? Thank you so much.
主席你好，现场的朋友。
Thank you, Chair, all the audience. Good morning. I'm from China, and please allow me to raise some questions in my mother tongue. I'm in communication, and together with me, there are some colleagues from the same industry as in China. There are profound changes happening every day. In a lot of fields, China are in the front of the world. Because I am in communication, I've also experienced the tremendous transformation in communication. There are more than 1 billion people in China use new media forms. I've also heard from previous speakers that also sustainable development has been integrated in younger generations' life. I would like to ask the UN, do you have any plans to use new social media forms to include more younger generations in this cause? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much. For our young friend Jananaish, I'm sorry for the mispronunciation of your name, from India. I understand on the sports, on human development, it was just a statement, not so much a question. And your question was about using millets. And I can recall my meeting with Prime Minister Modi a couple of months ago, where some aspects of the sustainability transformation were discussed. And I remember his passion about using millets as improving the food and environmental sustainability in your country and maybe beyond that. And I was very much impressed. For those who might not be aware, today we have a major issue of supplying food and nutrition for about 8 billion people on the world. And about 750 million of them are facing very, very serious malnutrition or hunger. If we look ahead, by 2050, the number of people on the earth might be around 10 billion. In order to feed everybody, with the today's technology, with the today's methods, we need to increase our food production by 50%. It's already a big challenge. If we take into consideration that the food production and food processing is using about 75% of freshwater resources, what we have today, you may envisage that a linear prolongation, a linear increase with the same methods, same technology, the food production, if we have soil enough for that, by 2050, by 50%, it would be much more than 100% of the available water in the world. So basically, this mathematics doesn't work. The suggestion of Prime Minister Modi for shifting from some of the produce, including some of the rice, to millets, to me seemed a very logical proposal. Because the most important is not to cater for a certain market segment to make a sufficient amount of profit, Never mind what would happen to our climate, what would happen to our soil, what would happen to our environment. The most important is to provide in a sustainable manner enough food and nutrition food to all, not only now, but in the years and decades to come. That would require, in some areas, changing the crops, changing the agriculture technology, and decoupling also the water use from the increased agriculture production. It is a very complex task. We can do it. Actually, we have the knowledge and we have the abilities to make this big jump. A part of this big jump is to change crops wherever and whenever it is necessary. And therefore, the UN recognized the merits of producing millets in many parts of the world. If your question is about whether or not you can oblige people to produce millets, no, of course. In the General Assembly, we cannot produce even resolutions that would be legally binding. It is your governments, your countries, and your societies to decide what is the best for you. What we collectively try to bring the knowledge together and weighing whether or not it would be a good way ahead, one of the good ways ahead. And I think the results in India so far are very encouraging. I'd like to congratulate you on that, particularly that India is one of the most drought-prone countries where water scarcity is set to grow. So if you can change some of your crops to less water-consuming crops, but at the same time still producing the same amount of calories and ingredients, I think it is a very promising direction. For our friend from Manipur, let me refer this question to what we discussed already in some other instances. I'm afraid the General Assembly is not in the position to bring police forces, to bring internal laws, to bring internal regulations in a given society of how to organize itself, how to improve the internal security, perceived or actual security in a country or in certain parts of the country. We believe it is the prime responsibility of each and every government in cooperation with the stakeholders in the given country to achieve the best development, best security, and best prosperity of the nations. For the new types of social media, whether or not it's part of transformation, I simply don't know. But it would be very unwise to say that whatever social media platforms, what we have today, would be the same in 15 years' time from now. Just think back, what social media platforms did we use 15 years ago? Maybe Facebook, and not much more. Some of them don't exist today. Some others changed very much, and a huge number of others appeared. I have no reason to believe that new social media platforms would not appear as we speak, and we'll see what will survive, what is the best. I'm absolutely sure that the 8 billion are more and more using devices and channels directly being linked and interlinked among each other. And I think it's good. It's good that we use technology for improving our knowledge and improving our cooperation. What we have to pay a little bit more attention, the problem is usually not with the technology. The problems are usually in us. What are we using the technologies and platforms for? The same platform and the same technology can be used for improving people's life, well-being, or doing harm. So for me, the big issue is not so much technically how many more platforms are we going to have, but how can we agree on reducing the potential human risk factors in harm doing on those platforms, and how can we use those platforms for increasing the new values, human values, what we can create.
Thank you very much, President of the General Assembly, and thank you for your questions, for your participation, and for your presence today. I now invite His Excellency Ambassador Neville Gertz, the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Namibia to the United Nations and the co-facilitator of the 2024 Summit of the Future, to share his reflection. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody in the room. Mr. President, I think you have today taken away my role, because you have answered the questions as if you are the co-facilitator for the Summit of the Future. You have dealt with these questions so thoroughly, but I want to say to everybody first that I'm encouraged by the tone and by the input that I've heard in this conversation. It gives me confidence that we are on the right track, that the information that we are already working on as member states find a meeting space in your minds too. And where we have some gaps, we will take on board, and we have heard some ideas that may still have to be added to what we are working on already. But I'd just like to share a few thoughts with you in 2 minutes or so. One is to say that there is no question that we need to prepare ourselves better for the future that lies ahead of us. One of the founding parents of the United States, Benjamin Franklin, reminded us that if we fail to plan, we are in fact planning to fail. And it is absolutely necessary for us to look at the things that are lying ahead of us, especially coming from the experience of recent years. That where we have fallen short, we are drawing lessons from that. We need to prepare ourselves to be better, to enable ourselves to deal better with emerging disasters that will come our way, but also to deal with the challenges and the opportunities that will be coming up in the future. We are going to look into life on this planet, not for us now, but also to find solutions that will provide a sustainable future use of the planet for generations that will have to come, that will still come behind us. That future is already today representing our challenges in the ocean, but it will go into outer space. It will look into things that are, for many of us, perhaps still far out of our grasp and of our imagination even. And as the President has indicated earlier, member states, when we are negotiating here, when we are dealing with these complex issues, do not always have all the necessary expertise in the rooms. And it is in that sense that we need this partnership with civil society, with the multi-stakeholders, to draw on your expertise, because there are academicians, there are so many sources of information out there that we need to bring on board and that we can benefit from. And I want to give you the assurance that in the modalities resolution for the work in preparing for the Summit of the Future, we in fact have language that encourage major groups and other stakeholders to participate and engage in the preparatory process of the Summit of the Future. So rest assured that your voices, the ideas that you have, we are taking note of them. We are providing platforms for that. You may recall that we have actually started early in the year with some of those. And then we are now expecting that the policy briefs that the Secretary General's office will work on will all be out by the end of July. And we shall, as co-facilitators, beyond September 2023, resume interactions with the multi-stakeholders to get your input, your impressions on what is contained in these policy briefs, and for your additional input in on the discussions and negotiations that we will be going forward towards finalizing the pact for the future. I want to say a specific word to young people that there is, I'd like to leave you with 2 African proverbs. One, and they feed into each other. One tells us that when an older person dies, a library burns down. But there is the hope in the second proverb that says, it is the young trees that make up the forest. It is in the future that lies the new challenges, the new hope, the protection of things that have yet to come, built and based on the experience of others who have been before us, but taking it now into the next level with the skills we now have in terms of technology, in terms of our education, and in terms of the lived experiences that we go through. We look forward to continue this conversation, and we are, in fact, determined to bring out in the Pact for the Future a stronger commitment from the member states to live up to the demands and the expectations for the Sustainable Development Goals, so that we can address these challenges such as hunger, such as poverty, such as women inequality, such as health, all the main challenges that the SDG Summit in this year will want to address. We want to find a landing space for it in the Pact for the Future, so that we can ensure ongoing continuation of these important development goals. Lastly, on the point that was raised earlier here about food security, I think that is an absolute necessity for us to keep in mind the challenges that climate change present us with, and use new ways of ensuring that we improve soil productivity, Mr. President, so that through that we can stem the impact of droughts, of floods, of land degradation, and ensure that new technologies help us to improve food production and in the new ways of finding new and healthier food sources to sustain us into the future. So once again, thank you for your continued interest in the work that we do here, and please follow us on the website for the Summit of the Future, so that you can see when we announce consultations that will be virtual. We would love to hear from you when these meetings take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for these remarks and for sharing that perspective. And you reminded me when you mentioned African proverbs, if you think your organization and yourself is too small to make a difference, try to sleep with a mosquito in a closed room. I think that's also an African proverb. Thank you, President Kőrösi, for convening this town hall with us and offering your insight into civil society's significant contribution to implementing Agenda 2030, and for taking all these unscreened questions, including and how can we accelerate achievement of the SDGs. Special thanks to all of you with us today, and whether in person or virtually. I would also like to thank my colleagues in the civil society unit who have helped organize this and made it possible for all of you to participate. Thank you very much for being with us, and I wish you a very nice day. Thank you. And I'm sorry for all of those who couldn't ask the questions, but there will be future opportunities. Thank you.